Let's put in perspective what Canada does for the Arctic. We already have the second largest icebreaker fleet in the world after Russia. Once our icebreaker program is completed, we will have the largest. We will have the largest. We will have 42 icebreakers. The Americans have one. Americans have one. We're going to help them build them. But we are taking responsibility for our defense in the Arctic, the defense of our coast.
42-1. With those numbers presented this morning, the fundamental assumption of American supremacy has just collapsed. What happened in Halifax fundamentally rewrites the balance of power in North America. The United States was always the ultimate protector, while Canada remained the quiet beneficiary of a continental security umbrella. But in a single, devastatingly calm assessment, Prime Minister Mark Carney shifted that narrative completely. He exposed a glaring reality in the new global battleground of the Arctic. Washington is remarkably exposed. Ottawa is not. The Arctic is no longer a frozen periphery. It is the central artery of future global trade and a highly contested strategic frontier that requires massive, sustained maritime investment. As global competitors rapidly expand their northern capabilities, the United States has allowed its northern fleet to atrophy to a single operational icebreaker. Canada, in stark contrast, is finalizing a world-class fleet of 42. By stating publicly that Canada will not only secure its own coast, but actually help the United States build its capacity, Mark Carney executed a masterclass in diplomatic role reversal. This is the evolution of Canadian statecraft in real time. It is a polite, mathematically undeniable declaration of sovereignty. Ottawa is no longer asking for American protection, but rather providing the logistical framework that Washington desperately lacks. How does a superpower maintain leverage when it cannot even navigate the waters of its own northern border? It cannot. If the United States cannot defend the northern perimeter, it loses the authority to dictate terms to the nation that can.
And how many of our strengths based on close ties to America and their deep ties between Nova Scotia and New England and, of course, America, but those strengths based on deep ties to America were becoming our vulnerabilities because of choices the U.S. was making. It's their right, but it's our imperative to respond. And people sensed even a year ago the rupture. But what I felt was the resolve, the determination of Nova Scotians to take matters into their own hands. And as of Canadians to take care of ourselves so we can take care of each other.
That line changes everything. Acknowledging that the deepest bilateral relationship in modern history has become a strategic vulnerability is a profound geopolitical pivot. For decades, Canadian leaders built their entire political and economic identities on their proximity to the Oval Office. Proximity meant prosperity, and alignment guaranteed security. But the old world of guaranteed American reliability is gone. While Donald Trump talks unilateral disruption, Mark Carney engineers systemic resilience. The volatility of the current American administration has forced a total recalculation of Canadian national interests. When the White House treats international trade agreements as temporary leverage and views traditional allies as mere competitors, economic reliance becomes a severe liability. The government recognized that a system highly exposed to unilateral American decisions is inherently unstable. You cannot build a modern, high-tech economy if your primary trading partner constantly threatens to erase the rulebook at a moment's notice. How do you protect a domestic market from an erratic superpower? The response to American unpredictability is not to complain, but to actively build alternative supply chains. If Washington wants to utilize tariffs and border friction as negotiating tactics, Ottawa must construct a macroeconomic framework where those tactics lose their sting. The geopolitical calculation is simple. You cannot be pressured if you have strategic options. Optionality is the ultimate currency in a fragmented world. To achieve true strategic independence, military capacity in the North is only the first step. The second step requires a commercial firewall that completely isolates the Canadian market from Washington's policy shifts.
We have launched Canada's first defense industrial strategy. There's a lot of big numbers, but I want you to take this one away. That strategy, public money combined with private, will catalyze over $500 billion of investment over the course of the next decade in Canada. We're not sending the money to the United States. We're investing it here in Canada to grow this economy.
The numbers tell a definitive story. $300 billion in new, non-U.S. trade is a macroeconomic realignment of historic proportions. It is a structural buffer designed specifically to absorb and neutralize cross-border pressure. By securing 20 distinct trade and security partnerships across 4 continents in less than 12 months, Canada is actively diluting American economic leverage. When a foreign leader threatens a baseline tariff, a nation tied to a single market faces an economic catastrophe. A nation with a globally diversified export portfolio, however, simply reroutes its supply chains to more reliable partners. This is how a mid-sized power secures stability in an era of deglobalization. Ottawa is constructing a network of alliances that guarantees economic predictability regardless of who occupies the Oval Office. It is a disciplined, mathematical approach to international relations that prioritizes long-term resilience over short-term political appeasement. Canada is actively engineering a future where it is a reliable partner to the G7, but a highly independent economic force in its own right. But can global grand strategy succeed if the domestic foundation is cracking? A leader cannot project strength on the international stage if the citizenry is struggling to afford basic necessities at home. Global volatility, supply chain disruptions, and the looming threat of trade disputes have created immense financial anxiety for the middle class. This is where the macro-political strategy must intersect with the reality of the working public. To maintain the political capital required for a massive global realignment, a government must prove that its international maneuvers yield tangible domestic benefits.
From the start, we've been relentlessly focused on making life more affordable for Canadians. On our very first day in office, I kept the promise I first made here in Halifax to cancel what had become a divisive consumer carbon tax. We then cut taxes for 22 million middle-class Canadians, saving up to $840 a year. We've cut taxes for first-time home buyers, saving them up to $50,000 on their first home. We've reduced tolls on the Confederation Bridge from $50 to $20 and cut the fares on ferries by 50% here in Atlantic Canada. A few weeks ago, we launched the Groceries and Essentials benefit, which will deliver hundreds of dollars more into the bank account of more than 12 million Canadians, 300,000 Nova Scotians.
This is code for absolute internal stabilization. It signals a complete synchronization of foreign policy and domestic relief. While Washington debates tariffs, Ottawa signs direct economic buffers for its own citizens. He paused slightly, letting the sheer scale of the domestic pivot sink in. His demeanor remained absolutely calm as the economic realities were laid bare. The decision to immediately cancel the consumer carbon tax and inject targeted relief directly into the bank accounts of the middle class is not merely retail politics. It is a strategic necessity designed to insulate the population from external shocks. By offsetting the financial burden caused by global instability, the government ensures that external crises cannot be leveraged to fracture Canadian society from within. This brings the entire strategy into focus. 12 million citizens protected internally provides the Canadian economy with an unshakable, resilient workforce, while exposing the severe lack of similar safety nets for the American working class. $300 billion in new markets opened internationally guarantees Canadian industrial sovereignty, while simultaneously representing a massive loss of market control and leverage for American manufacturers. 42 icebreakers securing the North means Ottawa completely dictates its own borders, leaving Washington entirely dependent on Canadian infrastructure to project power. The contrast could not be sharper. One leader chooses unilateral disruption. The other chooses alliances, stability, and absolute strategic independence. Canada has stopped reacting to American ultimatums. Instead, it is actively building a reality where those ultimatums no longer matter. What happened in Halifax today was more than a routine Chamber of Commerce address. It was a glimpse into a changing global order. If you want sharp, fearless analysis of how Canada is navigating global pressure while expanding its economic power, this is the channel for you. We break down the strategy behind the speeches, the leverage behind the deals, and the leadership behind the headlines. Mark Carney isn't just reacting to events. He's reshaping Canada's global position in real time. Subscribe to Canada SR, turn on notifications, and stay ahead of the geopolitical shifts defining this decade. And now I want to hear from you. Will Canada's rapid trade diversification successfully insulate it from U.S. tariff threats? Or is the North American economic integration simply too deep to bypass? Let me know in the comments below.